Football is back. We've waited a long time. We've had an extraordinary end to last season, but finally the 2021 season is upon us, and I've got my league predictions here I'm going to share with you today, guys. This is football theory, and football is back, and what is more exciting, or just as exciting as watching football, it's talking about football with pens and paper. So that's what we're going to do today. So with the transfer market being open now to the 5th of October, teams have got a bit longer to make new signings and stuff. So I'm going to kick straight off with number 20. This is the team I think, for me, they haven't got enough star quality to stay in the league. I think they did well to get up. So in number 20, it's going to be West Brom. They've made a few signings in the transfer window, and I think if any hope is going to be for the Magpies to stay up, it's going to be because of Pereira. I think that right winger, he's going to be the source of goals for them. I just don't think they're going to score many. I think I'm going to predict maybe the club as a whole will score 25 to 30 goals, and they're obviously going to concede. They haven't got the strongest defence, so I think that's why I'm going to place them in number 20. They were quite lucky in some ways to come up in the first place, so that's my positioning for them is number 20. So now on to 19, I'm going to choose Fulham. And I think with a lot of fans will be thinking the same. Again, newly promoted, it is a big step up from the Championship to the Premier League. And they came up 2 seasons ago and they tried to buy their way back into the Premier League, and it just didn't work. The cohesion, there was no gel amongst the players. Their defence was awful, and this time they've gone with a new tactic. Obviously they've got Slaven Bilic as the manager, and I think he's probably their best player on the squad, is actually the manager. I think he's going to be their only saving grace, but I do think they're going to be relegated. They just haven't got enough star quality at all. They just feel like a Championship team to me. So yeah, so I placed them 19th. So on to 18th, which is a bit of a controversial one. It took me a bit of a time here between number 18 to 17. It was a bit of a tricky one, especially with obviously what happened last season. I didn't actually think Bournemouth was going to go down, but obviously they ended up going down. So this one, I'm going to go West Ham for 18. So the final relegation spot, the award goes to West Ham. And my reasonings for that with these rankings, my reasoning is due to squad depth, star quality, managing style, and that's what I'm kind of basing it off, obviously because there's no form yet because we haven't actually started the season. So with me, all the boxes, they don't tick. West Ham, they've got a poor recruitment. They've got just poor in recruitment in general. They signed Sebastian Haller last season, and he's failed to really make a difference at all. I think he scored 3 or 4 goals in his entire season last season, and I think that's their big problem, is their strike partnerships don't work. They kind of play off with one striker with the 2 wide players. There's just not enough delivery for the centre man. I think that's why Haller kind of struggled, because he's a big player, strong, quick. He should have fitted, I think, but I think it's just the midfield too stagnant, and again the defence is way too leaky. So that's my reasoning for West Ham. And in terms of transfer news, they've been quite poor. Obviously, they let go of Diagana, which I think was a poor decision. I think he was one of their up-and-coming youth academy players that could have really kind of spiced the team up a little, because they're a bit... I think they're just a bit of a lazy style when it comes to football. They don't press hard enough. I mean, Mark Noble tries to make the team tick, as captain, and there's just not enough between the defence through to the strike partnership, and Diop, who had looked a couple of seasons ago like a promising centre-back, he hasn't got what it takes to stop them goals going in. So yeah, that's why I think they're going to be the last relegation spot. So on to number 17. So like I said, I was torn between these because last season Villa, they really did struggle, and I think it was down to Jack Grealish by himself. I think he's the one who kind of saved them. So I think Dean Smith is going to be a bit wiser this season. He knows where his problems are, and if you're an Aston Villa supporter, I think you'll know also that, again, with the likes of West Ham, Aston Villa struggle going forward. Obviously, Jack Grealish was one of the most fouled players in the Premier League last season. So with him winning loads of free kicks and stopping play, you need somebody to take advantage of the dead balls. And for me, Samatta, and of course they had Wesley, they paid over the odds for him. I think he was one of the most overrated signings of the last season. And again, a bit like Aller, he didn't fit in at all. So they're definitely in the hunt for a striker. There has been talks that Dean Smith, that is his top priority for Villa. So if they sort that out, then they might scrape through. But if not, they are going to be struggling. It will be between West Ham and Villa if they can't sort that attacking option. Because defensively, again, we know they're not... Again, they haven't got the strongest defence, but I think what saved them was the fact that they did score. And obviously West Ham didn't, so that's my reasoning for that. So Villa, you need to, maybe buy another centre-back. And also definitely going forward, because Trezeguet, a really exciting player, I think. I think he's underrated. And also Hotter, I think, again, if them two can stay fit and get in the team, they could really provide some good width for the central striker to get onto the balls they can put into the box. But for me, Samatta doesn't cut the mustard, so neither does Wesley, so they definitely need to be in the transfer window for a striker. So hopefully they can get that done, and I think they will survive another Premier League season. I hope they do, because they're one of the lower teams I do actually like to watch. So hopefully they can stay up. So moving on to 16th. With this one, this is my first Premier League prediction I'm doing. But for me, after all the years of watching football and since they came up in the Premier League, they're one of them teams where they're hard to play against at home. They're very difficult to break down, but they do lose stamina. Most of their goals are conceded between the 70th and 90th minute, so the last 20 minutes is where I think they just run out of energy. They haven't got enough quality off the bench. And of course, I'm talking about Burnley. So I'm placing them 16th. I think they're going to kind of be in a relegation battle, but they might again, dance with death, but they might actually come out okay. I mean, Sean Dyche is a fantastic manager, in my opinion. I think he's got Burnley above and beyond where they actually should be. If you actually take a look at their squad members, as we know, Chris Wood's out, and Ashley Barnes, who's one of their most pivotal players, he relies on having a second striker. He does not work well on his own. I just don't think he's got the pace. He's got the strength, the physicality to go up against some of the big centre-backs in the Premier League, but he can't do it alone. And with Wood being out for quite a while, that could be a big problem for Burnley. I think, again, they're too slow. The defence is, like I said, it can be a bit of a fortress if you go to Turf Moor. But some of the bigger top six sides can break them down. And I think even some of the ones fighting for survival, they can. It's just a kind of a patience game with Burnley because they don't offer a lot going forward. And I think that's kind of a recurring theme for for teams that are trying to survive, is they just have not got enough quality going forward. So I think Burnley will defend well like they always have for the last couple of seasons, but they're just not going to offer a lot in attack unless they can sign some kind of creative midfielder would really do them well. Obviously, they've lost Hendrick, who I think was a really smart signing for Newcastle. Of course, he made his debut and was very well. So I think that was a big loss for the club. So Sean Dyche will be looking to not only replace him, but also maybe even looking for a future partner for Ashley Barnes, because he's getting no younger. He's got a great strike rate, but I think he's not a solo striker, so that's why I placed them in 16th. So moving on to 15th, the team I've put there is I see a lot of videos and a lot of people, they seem to like this club. I've never seen anyone say, I don't like this club. But for me, Crystal Palace will finish 15th. I don't think they're going to struggle. I think they've got just enough quality in all areas to survive comfortably. I know they did go down quite a few seasons ago, but that was before the likes of Zaha and some of the players. Obviously, they had Wan-Bissaka, but obviously he's gone to United. But in the days when I started watching football, they were the teams going down quite regularly. But I think now, under Roy Hodgson, I think they've got they managed to keep hold of a couple of their star players in Zaha. Obviously, you've got Jeffrey Schlupp as well down that left, who I think's got explosive pace. He assisted a lot of Zaha's and Benteke's goals last season. So I think, again, he'll be doing that. And again, Townsend, he's looking sharp in pre-season. I really like Townsend, and he's kind of in that stage where I think he's at the peak of his career, so the Palace are going to get the best out of him in these next couple of seasons. So I think that's where they're going to be. No better, no worse, kind of mid-table. Because again, I think their defence is where they need work. Obviously, they've got Guaita in goal, who I think's an underrated keeper. I think he just needs more protection from his back four when they play a back four. Obviously, sometimes they play wing backs with Schlupp. And so it all depends what formation he's going for or whether he's going to change it up. For me, they play best with four at the back, with Milivojevic kind of sitting just in front, because he's very much the guy who starts attacks off. So I think he's very good to be that anchor man in midfield. And he's fit again. Obviously, he was playing for Serbia, I think, in the Nations League. So they've definitely got him back for the season. I think he's going to be their key player. Him and Zaha, I think, are going to be the ones that are going to keep Palace safe. I think they're going to easily achieve their 40 points, because that's kind of what you need in this day and age to survive in the Premier League. Is you need to aim for that 40 points. And once you've got that, you can kind of not feel like you're safe, but it's definitely a better position to be in. So that's where I'm going to put them. If Zaha can start scoring more goals, I think he's very good at. He was the most fouled player, just ahead of Jack Grealish last season. But the thing with Palace that separates them two, he doesn't score enough. For me, Zaha, he's very good creative. He makes fantastic runs. Obviously, we know he's outrageously skillful and's got great pace. He just hasn't got that final product a lot of the time. A criticism hailed to Traore of Wolves a couple of seasons ago. He had the pace, he had everything apart from that final last moment of quality. And I think Zaha, this season, if he steps it up and he gets that finishing product, whether it's an assist or a goal, I think Palace will be doing okay in 15th. So on to 14th. This team, for me, they've made a couple of decent signings in Adam Lallana. So I think if you've been reading the transfer centre every day like I have, you'll now be talking about Brighton in 14th. Obviously, his departure from Liverpool was a sad one for me, but I think it was time for him to move on. I think he was never going to get first team action. And a player of his quality, I know that he divides opinion, but for me, I think he's a quality player. He's an old-fashioned player, very hard to get the ball off, very silky feet, breaks the play up really well. So I think that's a tremendous signing for Brighton. So I think they'd be very happy to have signed him. And also, again, they're looking to their previous players like Solly March. I think he's going to be pivotal, again, providing a bit of pace, because that's what the modern day team needs to be. They need to be quick going forward and quick getting back. And I think Solly March and also the New England hopeful Tariq Lamptey, I think will be very important. He's going to make his breakthrough this season. We saw glimpses of him last season, and of course he had a spell at Chelsea where he played, I think it was 3 matches for Chelsea. He came to the point where he decided, I'm young, I'm not going to get any time here in front of Reece James and Azpilicueta, so I want to move. And obviously he chose Brighton. I think that's the perfect club for him. I don't think they're going to struggle at all this season. I think they've got enough quality. I think he's looking razor sharp and could give Trent Alexander-Arnold a run for his money in that right-back role for England in the Nations League, I think. I would certainly call him up. I think he's really showing his peak at the moment. I think if Gareth Southgate brings him up now and gives him the confidence, I think he certainly could be in England's future starter, or at least off the bench. So that's, for Brighton for me. Obviously, they lost Aaron Moy, but he was very pivotal last season, scored a lot of goals, a lot of assists for Brighton. So hopefully, and of course, Florian Andone, if any of you remember him, he's been away injured and he's just come back. So he's kind of their main threat for attacking wise. So if he stays fit, I think Andone could be the difference for Brighton. So moving on to 13th. So we're kind of getting into the breaking into the top. These are the teams that could start breaking into the top 10. Excuse me. So I'm going for the Saints for this one. I'm a big fan of their new signing, Danny Ings. I think he had a fantastic first season. Obviously, almost clinching the Golden Boot. He had around about 20 goals. And for that to be a personal within a squad of Southampton's quality, I think that's fantastic. Before his arrival, I think the club will be lucky to score that many collectively. But now they've got someone who can score that many individually. That kind of frees up other players to be able to, if they can knock a few in, they're going to have no trouble at all having a good season this season. And of course, Shea Adams, I'm really excited about. They obviously signed him from Brighton last season. We didn't really get to see him much last season, but I think, again, another young, powerful English striker. I think he's going to surprise a few people this season. If they can build up a chemistry, Ings and Shea Adams, I think they're very different players, so I think they'll play off each other really well. I think Danny Ings is the finisher. He'll wait for the movement from Adams. I think Adams is going to drive forward, and I think Danny Ings will be the scorer. So if their partnership can work, I'm really excited to see what Southampton can do. And obviously Ralph Hasenhüttl's a tried and tested manager wherever he goes. I think they had a disaster last season. Obviously they lost 9-0 to Leicester, but since then I think a lot of people thought he was actually going to be sacked as a manager. He said publicly that he was going to resign after that performance. He decided not to, and he really turned Southampton around, and I'm really glad he's staying at Southampton. I think he's their best shot as a manager to get them to break into the top 10. I just don't think it's this season. And again, I think their overall quality, their depth of their squad, the likes of James Ward-Prowse is getting on. I think he's past his best. I think defensively they're quite strong in the wing backs. Obviously you've got Bertrand who can play left back really well, and obviously their keeper, they've got a decent keeper, so I think they'll be safe with McCarthy if he carries on with his form. I think I'm not worried about Southampton, of course. So moving on to number 12, it's going to be Newcastle, and with all the controversy surrounding them, I think Steve Bruce, when he was appointed, he was hated by most of the Newcastle fans. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he was not the successor of Rafa Benitez that they wanted, but I think it's the one they need. Obviously, he's a born and bred Geordie. I think he understands the culture and how important football is to Newcastle. It's one, other than perhaps Liverpool or Manchester United, it's probably the most rich in football history in terms of historically with Newcastle, so it's a really good club. It's seen its fair share of tough times, but I think if they can get these new investors, inject some cash flow for Steve Bruce to spend, and if they get the right recruitment, I think they could, within this season or the next, start to break through into the top 10. Obviously, Alassane Maximin was a fantastic signing. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see too much of him on his debut season through to ankle injuries and such like. So we saw glimpses of his potential. And again, with a lot of things, he was one of them who struggled scoring goals. He was fantastic making creative runs, but he just didn't have that final product. Neither did Almiron. Neither of them scored until the back end of the season. They waited a long time to score, but I think they're going to be worth the money this season. So I think San Maximin, and obviously they've just signed Callum Wilson, who's a tried and tested goal scorer for Bournemouth. Unfortunately, they couldn't stay up, but that was a smart move from Steve Bruce to sign Callum Wilson. So I think he's going to be the difference. He's going to get their goals, because last season their top goal scorer was John Joe Shelvey with 6 goals. So if your goals are coming from midfield or defence, that says something about the club, that you're obviously not creative enough in your attack. So I think with Callum Wilson, I think that's really going to improve Newcastle. I'm really excited to see what they can bring, because as a club and as a culture, I'm really, really like Newcastle. I've always have. I just think, obviously, they haven't won anything domestically since the 60s, so I think they really need a big turnaround, and I think this could be the start of something new for Newcastle. So going into number 11, so this is one off the top half of the table, so this is between 11 and 10. It was a difficult one. As an 11th of 10, I've got former promoted sides, but I've gone for 11, I've gone Sheffield United. I think they had an outstanding, I think everyone could agree They had an outstanding season last season. No one expected them to do as well. I didn't. I didn't do a prediction, but I kind of, behind closed doors, I was thinking, no, they're not going to stay in the Premier League. They're going to be fighting for survival. And yet they broke through the top 10, so they surprised everyone. If you look at them, they've got no particular quality areas, no star names. It's just, I think, the whole team's bought into Chris Wilder's tactics and intensity of how they play. The tactics are fantastic. I think he's one of the best tactical managers in the Premier League at the moment for what he's done. They're so difficult to play against. They're a team you don't like playing against. You get very frustrated as a team trying to break them down. And obviously that was tried and, that was established last season, obviously finishing in the top half of the table. But for me, I think they're just going to slip. They just haven't, I think to an amount a season like they did last season, they did need to go into the... Obviously, they've lost their Dean Henderson, who's gone back on loan back to United, to his parent club. So they've lost him. Obviously, they bought Aaron Ramsdale for 12 million, which for me is a sensible signing for a shot to goal ratio like to save. He had a decent one last season. Obviously, Bournemouth went down. It was the defence that let them down. So I think all in all, he's only 21, 22 years of age, Aaron Ramsdale. He's an England hopeful, so I think that's going to help them. But I just don't think they're going to reach the potential they did last season. I still consider it to be a good season for them if you're a Sheffield United fan. I think, 11th is fantastic for a second season back in the top flight. So by no means am I saying that that's a poor finish to go a couple of places down. I think that's still an achievement. But that is where I'm going to place them. So which comes on to my top 10. So this is the business end of the table. And it took me quite a while between 10 and 1 because we've got so many new emerging clubs that it's not like it used to be where top 4 was predictable, and neither is the top 10. So for number 10, I'm going for the newly promoted Leeds. Obviously, they ran away with the championship last season, gained automatic promotion. I think, obviously, Bielsa is... Well, he's in my top 4 managers on the planet. So for him to be able to be at Leeds, I think is unbelievable. Obviously, Leeds had their glories way before my time. They were winning Division 1 championships, European championships, way before my time. I think we're going to see that kind of level of heights again under Bielsa, under his way of thinking. I think tactically, he is the best manager on the planet. No one goes into as much detail on tactics of opposition than Bielsa, and that's coming from a Liverpool supporter. For me, he's the perfect fit for Leeds. My reason why I put them 10th and not higher is I just don't think they can sustain the high intensity they can on the pitch for the full season. I think from a scientific point of view, it's impossible. There will be injuries playing at that high level, and obviously under our current times, obviously hardly any teams had a pre-season. The Nations League, for some reason, taking over the Premier League. There's way too many congested fixtures for all the teams, and particularly for a team like Leeds who play the way they do, like Liverpool, with that closing down mentality, leaving everything else on the pitch. Not a lot of teams play like that. So for me, I don't know whether they've got the depth if, say, one or two of their players, say Harrison or Helder Costa, get injured, that their flanks are going to be severely limited. So that's my only concern. But obviously, we've still got a couple of weeks left for the transfer market. And I think Bielsa is interested in a few players. So we'll see what he has in store. But I think 10th for a return to the Premier League will be a fantastic result for Leeds. So I really hope you can get somewhere around there because you're a fantastic side to watch. So that brings me on to number 9. And of course, they won the Premier League back a few years ago, but I think slowly but surely we're kind of seeing where they should be. I think obviously it was a bit of a fluke with Leicester, so I'm going to place them 9th. I think ever since that title win, they've slowly, by no means am I slating them. I think they're a fantastic young group of players, but I think we're kind of seeing more naturally where they're going to be finishing every season. Well, not every season, but where they're going to consistently be is around the top 10, but I don't think they're going to be challenging again, personally, for me. Jamie Vardy, obviously, he's getting on. He's having his best career when he's got older. Obviously, when he first signed for Leicester, he was already, what a lot of people would consider to be in his final few seasons, but for some reason he's just as razor sharp as, players, 6-7 years younger than him. So, but for me, I think his stamina's starting to go. Obviously, it's not going to be at 100% due to all this COVID restrictions and lack of friendlies and training. But he's their star man. Obviously, he was the Golden Boot winner last season. But I just don't think they can rely on him totally. If he gets injured, Iheanacho for me is not a natural replacement. I think he's fun to watch, but he's not a natural goal scorer for me, like Vardy is. When Vardy smells blood, he's like his shark, and no defence or keeper in the world can stop Vardy if he's on form. Obviously, they've tied down James Maddison now for the last couple of seasons, and they brought in Tielemans permanently. So they're a team for me that they're starting to build a good squad. I think they've got a decent squad at the moment, but to be breaking consistently into the top four, they're still building at the moment for me. I think Kasper Schmeichel's only got maybe a season or two left in him. And obviously that's obviously him being the captain. It's going to be, there's no natural captains other than Vardy. And again, he's the wrong side of 30. So that's my opinion. Obviously they lost Ben Chilwell, and obviously they brought in their new signing of Castagna, who I think looks exciting, but he's only 21. So will he take to the Premier League the same way? So, well, I guess we'll see. So that's why I placed them ninth. Obviously they finished fifth, so it's a couple of positions below last season, but I'd still consider that to be a successful season if you're a Leicester fan. I think Brendan Rodgers is going in the right way, signing a mixture of experience and youth together, and it's going to work, and they're going to be around in the Premier League for years to come, no doubt. They'll be in the top 10, but for me, they're not going to be in the top 4 this season. It brings me on to my most controversial. I never actually thought I'd say this, but for number 8, I think it's going to be Everton. I think what Carlo Ancelotti, there's no surprise what Carlo Ancelotti is. Wherever he goes, he turns teams upside down, and that's just the nature of manager he is. I think Everton are extremely fortunate to have a high-profile manager like him. I think his tenure at Napoli was coming to an end in terms of their Champions League and their Serie A kind of position. So I think it was natural for him to move on and find a new challenge. And obviously Everton was the one, and obviously they finished way below expectations last season. They brought in some smart signings, all of them, costing 60 million in total. I don't think he's done. I don't think he needs to address the strikers. I think Calvert-Lewin is starting to show what he can actually really do. I think he's looking powerful, he's looking sharp and alert in front of goal. And obviously Richarlison, he's already a folk hero amongst the Everton fans anyway. And for me, the midfield was the problem last season, and the defence, and he's already kind of corrected the midfield. I think obviously a lot of news and kind of excitement has been around James Rodriguez. For me, that's not the most important signing they've made. For me, I think it's Doucouré. They lacked midfield stability and defensive stability last season. You could play one ball over the top and get a goal. There was just no interaction. There was no concrete cohesion or charisma in the midfield, which forced Digne forward, and then there was just no cover. For me, Doucouré's that man. He fills the gap. He did it at Watford. He was, in my opinion, Watford's best player. So I think they've done really well to sign him. So he's the one I'm most looking forward to. He might be the one who looks the most underrated out of the 3 signings they've made. Obviously, they made the signing of Alain from Napoli as well. But for me, Doucouré is going to be the one which I think is going to affect Everton the most. And obviously, Pickford had a difficult season last season. And I think Ancelotti's faith in him has given him a confidence boost. So I think he's going to be back to his best. Obviously, he had that dip in form, but I think with his faith being restored by the manager by not going into the market and buying a new keeper, I think that's given him the confidence to really sort that defence out. So that's my area of concern for them, is their defence. I think Mina, Holgate, Keane, they're not top table quality for me. I think they really need to look. I think Luca Digne, he's a quality left back. I think he can stay. But like I said, the centre halves are poor. They never win second balls. From set pieces, they're terrible. They need to be the first one there to win the header, particularly if against, big, powerful centre forwards. For me, King gets knocked off the ball too much. Mina, he's young, so he's still got time to improve, but I think they need to, if it was Carlo, obviously working under the likes of Koulibaly. I'm not saying they're going to sign Koulibaly, but they need someone of his kind of strength and experience to kind of whip the defence into shape. And then you never know, they might be able to get better next season. But that's where I'm going to place them. So for 7, this is a bit of a controversial one. And for me, it's a bit painful because obviously I like Jose Mourinho. I think he's a fantastic manager. But I don't think any manager in the world can fix Spurs' problems at the moment. It's just one of them clubs where you look at them and think, oh dear, they've got the potential, but for one reason or another, whether it's injuries or whether it's discord amongst, the training amongst the management, there always seems to be some drama going on at Spurs. And I think obviously what happens behind closed doors does affect on-field form, like with West Ham. That was one of my reasons for what's going on. There's so much tension and unease and discord amongst the board and the squad and everything. That is something that shouldn't happen because it does affect player morale. And that's, I think, what's affecting Spurs at the moment. I think Mourinho is going to take a bit more time, if he's allowed, for the players to buy into his philosophy. He's very much a defensive-minded manager. And I think, obviously, with Danny Rose pretty much set to go, I think that's a good bit of business by Mourinho. Obviously, he wasn't happy to stay here. Obviously, they've already let go of Kyle Walker-Peters, which for me was a bit of a surprise. But they brought in Matt Doherty from Wolves, which I think is a very wise decision. I think if he can link up with Harry Kane, if Kane can get back to anywhere near the form he was, and that brings me on to my next point about Spurs is Kane, the forward. I think once you get riddled with a lot of long-term injuries, your form never really returns. I think we're going to start to see the decline of Harry Kane. I don't think he's going to be in the Golden Boot picture this season at all. I feel for me, Son was overused, and they can't rely on a naturally left-footed, left-winged player as a central attacker. So I think what they need to do is still keep Kane, but they need to sign someone. There was rumours about them getting Arkadiusz Milik from Napoli, but that fell through. So Mourinho, that's the kind of area. He's on the right trajectory. I think he just needs the time and the money and the patience to do what he wants to do, because Milik was that kind of statistically, a high percentage goal scorer like Aubameyang is. That's the kind of what they need to bring in. So that's why they're 7th and Arsenal are 6th. So it's a bit of a toss-up between the two. They've got similar problems, so they're similar in the table for me, I think. What's stopping them? Well, there's quite a few things stopping them breaking them into the top 4. One is the manager, I think, is way too inexperienced. I think the template Arteta's setting out is fantastic. I think he's a good young up-and-coming manager, but he's just not tested for the Premier League yet. Obviously, he was fathered by Pep for a long time. He was mentored by him, being his second-hand man. So a lot of that experience Pep has, that knowledge would have been departed on Arteta, which he's going to try and bring into the Arsenal team. But for me, a bit like Lampard, he's not tested in the Premier League. It's ruthless. One injury can mean the disaster. It could be the end of your season with one injury. For me, Arteta hasn't learned that yet, I think. But he's going about it the right way. That's why I placed them 6th. I think what he has done in the short amount of time now, he's been officially named as manager, not just head coach. I think with Gabriel, I think he was man of the match on his debut. I think there's more to come from him. I think that was their main problem, was the defence. It was laughable at times last season. I remember even commentators watching Arsenal. It was a comedy of errors last season. It was embarrassing. I mean, it was the kind of defending you'd see Tranmere Rovers do. But now I think with Luis, for some reason, he seems to have found his 6th wind. He's an aging centre-back, but he seems to be what they need. Obviously with Gabriel and William Saliba, the young 18-year-old, I think there's a lot of future in him. Obviously they've tied down Aubameyang now. So I think that was their main target this season in terms of transfers, was to keep Aubameyang, because without him, who knows, they might be out the top 10. No one scored as many or assisted as many as him. He was influential, in winning the FA Cup, in the Community Shield. I think he's on fire, as he always has been for the last couple of seasons. That's why I give them 6th. So now moving into the top 5, which again, we're starting to talk about Champions League spaces, well, the contention for Champions League spaces between 5th and 4th. And a controversial one, as I've been seeing and hearing on social media, is I'm placing Manchester United 5th. I know, obviously, domestically they are arguably the best team in the league, but recently, ever since obviously Ferguson went, they've not been the same United. Their recruitment, Ben Woodward, has been, well, he should be sacked right now. So if there's any, people out there who can get that done, make sure you sack him, because he's terrible. The players he brought in thought that would fit were terrible. They completely ruined the likes of Di Maria, the likes of Memphis Depay. They had Zlatan Ibrahimovic under him, and none of them did anything. So for me, get rid of Woodward. And Solskjaer, again, he's a new manager. I think they only brought him in because of his connection with the United fans. A bit like with Chelsea. I think they just brought him in because he's a club legend. For me, he's not a manager. He got Cardiff relegated, so, what's that say about your managerial skills? So I think they need to sack the manager and basically rebuild the team. There's about 4 or 5 players I'd keep from United, and that's about it. I think De Gea's way past it. His confidence levels are at an all-time low, obviously losing out of his Spain place even to... When you're losing out your national spot to Kepa, who's arguably the worst keeper in the league, that's saying something. If the Spain national manager has not got faith in you to be the Spain number 1, you can't be the number 1 at United. If you're going to win a league, you need a world-class keeper. When they haven't had a world-class keeper since Van der Sar back in the early 2000s, and that's why they won the league. For me, Mason Greenwood, he's promising. I think he's going to have a breakthrough season this season. But other than that, I think Rashford, again, might get them enough goals for them to make 5th. But they didn't even look bothered at the back end of last season. When they were fighting for Champions League, when it was Leicester, Chelsea, United, none of them looked like they wanted that 4th spot. And least of all United. Went down to the last day, and if it hadn't been for Bruno Fernandes, who in my opinion could be one of the best attacking midfielders in the Premier League at the moment, given his chance, I think if they can get him doing what he was doing after the lockdown, then they should finish 5th. No more for me because of the depth of their squad. McTominay, he's a flop. He was showing promise a season or 2 ago, but he's been ruined. Their back 4 are a joke. Maguire, obviously, we won't be seeing much of him. And Wan-Bissaka, I think he's a great player, but at a wrong club. So that's why I'd place them 5th. So now on to the top 4. So this is obviously where all teams aim to be, because it's the Champions League spots. And for me, it's a bit of a controversial one. People will be thinking, okay, he's done that, he's done them. They would have been waiting to hear where Wolves were. And obviously we've got this far, so that obviously means I've placed them 4th, and they're my dark horse for this season. I know it's controversial, and not a lot of you won't agree with me. Obviously, let me know in the comments. But for me, I think Wolves have what it takes to break top 4. They're going to be 5th or 4th. I've placed them 4th. I think they've got a fantastic manager who's been tied down for another 3 seasons in Nuno. He seems to be recruiting the entire Portugal squad to Wolves. So if Wolves can turn into Portugal, then they're definitely going to make top 4. Obviously, Moutinho is still there. They've got a great first 11. They're strengthening their bench. Obviously, they've got their new signing, who we didn't see last night, but he looks promising in Silva. Obviously, we did get to see Podence, so we didn't see much last season. He was very influential in the game. I think he could be a very intriguing option. Obviously, they lost Matt Doherty. But what I think's happening is I think he's lost Doherty. I think he's trying to plays Traore in the right wing-back position, which for me is the best of both worlds. I think that's where he could actually be at his most lethal. It might take a bit of time for him to adjust to it. But if you look at him, if you look at his stats, if you look at his his physics, he's perfect for running up and down that right wing. We've seen that no one in the Premier League can touch him once he starts running. And that's going forward. And he has got that finishing product now. He's been putting in loads of great crosses. His shot accuracy has increased immensely. So I saw FIFA 21 will be giving him a huge upgrade this season. And for me, defensively, who's going to get past him? If you've seen the size of him, if he can move and has got as much power that he possesses, if he's got that defensive mind switched on, if he can link up with Bolly, who, in my opinion, is the most underrated centre-back in the Premier League, they could be ridiculously hard to break down. And obviously going forwards, they've got the most complete centre-forwards in the Premier League in Jimenez. I think he is out and about the best striker in the Premier League. He holds up play fantastic. He's a lot stronger than he looks. He can provide perfect crosses, assist. Obviously, he's deadly on goal. So I think, for me, it's Champions League territory for them this season, which leads me into number 3, which for me, I think it's about where they're going to finish in Chelsea. I think they've gone a bit of a spending spree, which is understandable given their transfer ban. I think Abramovich and Lampard have got together in a room somewhere and said, basically, if it works on FIFA, it might work in the Premier League and buying the best players around the best leagues. That seems to be their game plan, a bit like when they signed Drogba and Petr Cech and, all of them back in the early 2000s of the Mourinho years. Kind of Abramovich said to Mourinho, go out and buy the best players and we'll win the league, and that's what they did. But for me, what's holding them back the most is the keeper. For me, I kind of feel sorry for the guy. I think too much pressure is put on goalkeepers in general. That sometimes you've got to look to the defence as well to see how much cover they're providing. But for me, he's making mistake after mistake. Obviously, that's Kepa Arrizabalaga. For me, he does not look confident. And obviously, they paid around about 70 million for him last season. And for me, it was a panic buy. Obviously, they lost Thibaut Courtois to Madrid, who wanted that, switch to Spain. And for me, they had a couple of weeks to find a replacement keeper of that quality. And he was not worth... He's probably worth about half what they paid for him. He's nowhere near worth 70 million. I think they paid over the odds for him, and that's kind of been proven since his arrival. For me, it's like me breaking down and my car being written off, and I want to go out and buy a Ferrari, yet somebody does up a nice, Vauxhall Astra and says it's a Ferrari and, charges me double for it. That's what it kind of makes me feel. For Kepa, he's not a Premier League keeper. His shot stopping is terrible. For me, which is one of the weirdest things, one of the easiest, one of the things you kind of expect a keeper to do is command your box from a corner. That's one of the worst traits you can have amongst a keeper, is not having the confidence in your own 6-yard box. To have the ability and the confidence to say to your defenders, it's mine. And every time he's gone to do it, he's gone to run, to catch it. Then he's second-guessed himself and goes for the punch. And more often than not, the punch goes to an attacking player on the opposition, and obviously they score or something happens. And for me, if you have not got confidence as a keeper, and if you're letting in long shot after long shot, keepers shouldn't have problems with long shots unless they're world-class efforts which no keeper could save. He's, like I said, his defensive blunders are basically what are keeping Chelsea away from winning a title. I remember Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher discussing this not too long ago, saying if you want to win the Premier League, you need a world-class keeper. You need an Ederson, you need a Neuer, you need Alisson. You need someone who can win you the league by themselves, and that's what Chelsea are lacking. Obviously, they brought in Havertz, who, for me, I'm not sure whether that was the right fit. Well, I think Werner was a sensible signing. For me, it reminds me of Didier Drogba. He's powerful, he's quick, he's astute to chances. I think that was a good signing, but for me, the rest were... I'm not sure. I think Thiago Silva, a lot of people have said obviously he was a free, but I think that was a good bit of business. I think he might be able to sort out the Chelsea defence. For me, Zuma doesn't cut the mustard for a top 4, defender. think Aspilicueta again, he's a good player, but he's 30. So I think, and obviously Thiago's 34, 35. So I think he was a quick fit problem. I think they brought him in to solve the problem quick, and they'll have to go back into the transfer market. So yeah, for the top two, it's the only two that could ever be in the top two in the last, say, 4 seasons. And for me, the number 2, and this is not being biased, it's going to be City. Obviously, ever since Pep came, they've had a remarkable few seasons. But for me, they've lost too many of their star quality players. They've lost Leroy Sané. They've lost David Silva. They've lost company. They've lost what you'd call the leaders in their team. So it's going to be interesting to see how much communication goes on. Obviously, they're trying to bring through youth talent. And obviously, they've signed Ferran Torres and Ake. Which Ake, yeah, he was a decent defender, but is he going to get played? We all thought, Cancelo, that was a good bit of business, but he played about 5 minutes in the whole of the Premier League season last season. So, yes, they're my number 2. I think it's going to be close. It was a tough one. I think there's only going to be a couple of points in it between City and number 1, which obviously now know is Liverpool. Yeah, but the differences between City and Liverpool for me, obviously, both managers have established their tactics, how they want to go about it. Pep has his stuff. Klopp has his, and for me, we've got a younger team, which is in our favour. If you look at all the ages of the different positions, we've got a younger squad, and I think that's what's going to propel us to keep going. We're going to have the stamina, even though we've got for a top 6 club, we've got a very small squad, but I think the squads we've got know each other in and out. It's almost telepathic at times between Firmino and Salah, and Mane and Salah. It's unbelievable to watch. And for me, City haven't got that at the moment. De Bruyne obviously is the one who links everything up, but obviously Aguero's gone out of favour. And Jesus, for me, still a bit young. He looked very promising, I'm not going to lie. He looked very promising, but I just don't think he's going to be enough to mount a title win for me. I think they're going to need to replace Aguero in this transfer window. I think it's pretty obvious Pep's at the end of his kind of end of the road with him. Obviously, his contract's up. He's a free agent in the summer. So if it was Pep and the board, I'd be looking to kind of cash in on Aguero while he's still hot property. So that's what I think they'll be doing. And I think that's what separates us and Liverpool. We've got an established front 3. Obviously, they've lost Sané. And Jesus was in and out of the team throughout the whole of last season. So consistently wise, I think that's what's going to separate us too. So they're my predictions. I'm going for Liverpool to win the 2021 season. I think Salah's going to be the main influence in terms of the goals. But for me, I think the standout player for Liverpool, which is going to be this season, it's going to be who I thought should have won the Premier League Player of the Year last season. I think it's going to be Jordan Henderson. I think his mentality about how he wants to play, how he lives life, how he influences others. I think he's a role model to any up-and-coming footballer wanting to play the beautiful game. I think his intensity, he never quits. You see me, his gas tank is on empty, yet he's still pressing down every ball. He's emotional, but not a hothead in terms of getting sent off. He never has a moment where you'd say, that wasn't, captain-like. I think he chips in with a lot of assists, a lot of goals. I think without him, the midfield doesn't tick at all. That was evident when he was injured. We still had great quality players in Keita. I think Keita came out last season fantastically. But for me, it was lacking that Henderson leadership. And obviously Milner had a more withdrawn role last season. Obviously with injuries in the back, he had to play in a defensive mind. So for me, Henderson's going to be the one who's going to win us the Premier League. And I'm also excited to see Tsimikas, whether he gets much time this season, obviously. And Minamino, I think he was very impressive during pre-season, but I just don't think he's going to be included too much this season. So yeah, if you agree, let's just leave comments down below to see whether you agree with my table rankings. And I guess we'll find out how accurate I was at the end of the season. And I see a lot of people, obviously this is my first time doing it. I'm going to do a point system like I see a lot of people do. I think it's a good idea, a good bit of fun, just to see how accurate I am. So yeah, if I get it spot on, it's 3 points. And then Obviously, depending how far out I am, that'll be how many points deducted from the score. So say, I don't know, City go 5th, I'll have to deduct 3 points off my score. So that's how it's going to work. I've been Football Theory. It's been fantastic and really exciting doing my first video for you guys. And I'll see you next time.